Okay, let's call to order the Waxhaw Town Board Work Session for May 10th, 2016. We have two items of business on the agenda. Strategic priorities, goals, and objectives, and the Board of Commissioners Town Manager protocols. I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, first item. Manager Wood will take us through a discussion of strategic goals and objectives. This is year 2 of Waxhaw's journey to implementing true budgeting, where the budget, like most towns and cities do it, is a policy and strategy document. You're going to walk us through, I think, the annual goals and objectives that staff working with you identified to support each of the initiatives.
Okay. Well, in April of 2015, the board did take the step of identifying a vision, mission, values, and strategic initiatives or priorities for FY 15-16. So what we've done, the vision, mission, values have stayed the same. The strategic priorities have stayed the same, with the exception of financial policies, with the board's approval, will now be considered as a separate document. But it does make the budget more of a strategic document versus just a series of line items with no or little connection to anything else. So if you think about the budget in a strategic way, with the strategic priorities, the master plan, the 5-year financial forecast, the 5-year capital plan, and then with the foundation of the financial policies guiding how the town's going to manage its financial resources, that really does bundle everything up in a more strategic, comprehensive way than, again, just a series of individual line items. And then to throw one more layer on top of that, where we're moving towards is developing a performance measurement program to evaluate the efficiency and effectiveness of the various town services. But we had to unwind a lot of those during the course of this year to understand how much some of these things were costing us. So once we get an understanding of what the cost is for events, as an example, or the finance division or information technology, getting an understanding of those, then we'll be putting ourselves in a position to measure the performance of those individual operations. So that's how this has transformed over the last couple of years. So and it starts with your vision. So think your vision, mission, value. You start narrowing down to specific goals and objectives. So that's where we are. And just starting with, and I'm not going to read all these. If you've got comments or questions or whatnot, we can go through them. But just starting with the ensuring operational excellence strategic initiative. I guess we'll just entertain questions, comments under this category, and then are you okay with that format? Just then moving through, because some of this is pretty straightforward, and some of it may require some more explanation.
So, on strategic initiative, ensure operational excellence.
Right.
I want to have a discussion about where we might have questions or
Right.
clarifications.
Right.
Okay.
And can I just one thing, this is a good example of how this works. So you've got the broad strategic initiative of ensure operational excellence. Then you have a goal, which is 1A, of operate an organization that consistently complies with its statutory obligations. So obviously, we always want to comply with our statutory obligations, but staff identified a few areas specifically that we knew we were going to address the coming year. That's not to say we're going to ignore everything else, but so that's the way each one of these works. Specific objectives that we know that the town or the staff would recommend that the town undertake for each one of these categories for the coming year. So that's the way that flows. It's not to say that we're not going to comply in other areas, because we are.
Yeah, it's kind of like I asked you the question about streets. It's
Right.
not that you're not going to do it. That kind of kicks in our Powell
Right.
funding, but
Correct.
didn't rise to the top here because you already are doing that. You just know we have some gaps.
Correct.
I'll get the ball rolling.
Okay.
In item B, under incentives, can you kind of articulate or share where you're going with incentives?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're seeing in the region with pay for, so specifically B1, all right, so develop and implement an employee incentive and retention program for police officers, also known as a career development program. One of the things that we're seeing in the area of Union County, as an example, they're raising their starting pay to $40,000 a year. We have officers that have been here for years that don't make $40,000. And what we don't want to see is an exodus. So the chief and I sat down, and instead of, the easy thing to do would just be to bump everybody's pay to become competitive. That's not what we want to do. We want to implement a career development program to incentivize folks getting certain certifications, certain types of education, and then there would be a reward financially to that as they achieve certain goals. But this is just for police officers, and the goal is to get us competitive in the region with pay, but not just by handing a check, but by incentivizing folks going out and having to achieve certain types of certification. One of the things that we're seeing when we've got a couple of one or two police officer vacancies right now, the applicant pool, with what the country's been through with law enforcement and the rap that it's taken, a lot of folks aren't going into law enforcement anymore. So the applicant pool is very thin. It's a very competitive environment. A lot of folks competing for the very best officers. We've got a good group of officers. We want to retain them. It's going to be much cheaper to implement a program like this than it is going to be to, if we start losing folks to Union County and other jurisdictions, to number one, find somebody, and then number two, pay for the training and whatnot to get them up to speed.
Starting pay competitive?
It's not $40,000 a year. That one kind of came out of left field during the course of the year. I think with the COGS pay and class study, it's generally competitive. A lot of officers, perfect example, guys that have been, and gals that have been here 2, 3, 4 years, still making mid-30s. We do give raises, we do have a good benefits package. But we felt like implementing a program like this would help us, incentivize folks getting certain and then they would get the reward of the pay. One of the things that the chief agreed to do this year was to forego. Historically, we've been trying to add an officer every year. So one of the things that you're going to see in the budget is you will not see a request for additional police officer position. The chief is foregoing that in order to produce funds to come up to implement this program. Makes sense. And we may look, when you look throughout the organization, another category we may look at is our building inspectors. Very similar, very competitive environment in terms of finding folks with the certain levels of certification that you need. I don't see this program, this type of program being implemented town-wide for all positions. There'll be specific categories where we want to retain folks that have certain skill levels that are hard to come by. Sense.
Other questions on section 1?
Does that make sense?
No, it does.
Okay.
I'll throw another one at
Okay.
you. You've got down here that you're going to formalize the employee development program. I thought Wendy was doing a great job this year. 2,700 plus hours of development. What does formalizing on top of 2,700 hours of development mean?
Yeah. So we've got a question for you, Wendy. All right. So under promoting employee retention and encouraging professional development, one of the specific objectives is to formalize employee development programs to encourage professional development. So talk to us about that.
When I know you've is going through some of the data we were talking about, 2,700 plus hours of development, it sounds like you're already got a good start.
Thanks. We really are. We've been very active, especially since Warren's come in, because he really pushes it and allows us to go forward. But what I want to do is put in a career development program.
Okay.
We already have the draft. We just have to, finalize it, review it, and get everyone's input and get Warren's approval.
Okay.
And that would be for the law enforcement already has theirs, so this would be for non-LEO only. Does that help?
Other questions on section 1?
I can point out a couple of things I'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. Okay. Improve efficiency of town services. I talked about this a little while ago. That was a goal that we had for this year, and we need to understand more about our costs before we're in a position to measure the efficiency of some of our services. So we'll have a year's worth of data under our belt at the close of this year. So we will be in a better position to develop a performance measurement program. Perfect example, think about the average cost of a call for service from the police department. Well, on the surface that seems pretty straightforward, but does that include self-initiated calls? You know, when they roll up on something, does it include property checks, which are pretty routine? So it's a matter, and then taking that data and comparing it to what other jurisdictions are experiencing, but making sure you're looking at apples to apples. So it's pretty, on the surface, some of these things seem pretty straightforward, but then when you clean the data or really making sure you're looking at apples to apples, it gets a little bit more involved. So that's where we want to go with performance measurement. Measure the performance and then benchmark it against other jurisdictions.
Are you comfortable we've gotten the departments broken out and can understand them from a cost standpoint, or is there still work to be done?
There's still a little work to be done. I think for we've made great strides this past year in doing that, but there's still some. I'll give you an example. So the cemetery is still wrapped up in the public services budget. Cemetery is generally thought of as a general government type service, so it needs to come out just so Todd's budget more represents transportation, as an example. So we've still got another level of this to kind of unwind. But for the most, I would say, is we're about 90% there. I feel real good about the strides we made this past year in breaking all these out. Can I talk about another one? Okay. The organizational workload capacity issue. So we would like to conduct an organizational capacity audit using a third party to assess our workload capabilities. So we've got, Commissioner Burrell and I were talking earlier, we've got a tremendous amount of work to be done specifically in the development services area. I'm concerned about our ability to not necessarily get that work done, but with all the other work on top of that. So we really need to get a better understanding of our organizational capacity from a manpower perspective, and understand where we are and the specific areas that need to be addressed.
Will that factor in consultants? I mean, as an outside?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got, two more, then we can move on to the next. We do want to begin talking about, a more permanent location, or at least having a conversation about it for town hall, as well as public services. So I don't think we're not obviously talking about doing construction documents. I mean, we need to talk about, what our options are with each one of those, and at least put ourselves on a path for FY 17-18, to get serious about town hall and public services. And I think that jives with what's in the 5-year CIP. But we are going to have to, and we've done some initial work that we can share to get your feedback, but that will require board direction on how you want to move in that area on each one of those facilities.
When do we have to notify on the lease?
Lease was a 5-year.
3-year.
Well, but there's a 2-year. 2 1-year extensions. So we are a year and a half in.
Early.
Yeah. So we're a year and a half in. Yeah. So clock's ticking.
Yeah, I just didn't know when the notification was on it.
But we'll have to, before the end of 3 years, we'll have to. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions on or clarifications on one?
Could
Paul?
I ask about F, if are we working towards getting somebody to write grants, or are we working towards somebody to facilitate the grants, or what are we doing?
Yeah, so generally what we've been doing is contracting for the grant writing side of it. I'm going to give an example tonight. Submitted a grant application for a community development block grant for a sidewalk on Howie Mine Road, and Kimley Horn helped us with that. And then, that's a great question, because then when you get the grant, there's the whole administration side of it. Think about the TAP grant. We're definitely, and Kurt will, kind of ride herd on that. But in addition to that, we're going to need some grant administration help It's not just a matter of, getting the grant and that's it, all the reporting that takes place with that. So yeah,
Follow up on that?
Yeah.
Do we have like a captain of grants in the town, or are we working towards that eventually, or?
well, every area, every department handles that themselves in terms of, so, we do have, sometimes we do, I think Lisa McCarter wrote she wrote the Grant Thread Trail?
Yes.
Yeah, as an example, yeah. So, yeah, the bridge, Thread Trail Bridge. So every department kind of manages their own grant opportunities as far as pursuing those. Yeah, yes. Okay.
Any other questions on item 1? Okay. Initiative 2, improve core infrastructure and services.
Yeah, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag on 2. We gotta work on our number in there. It should be 2A. I think the revised version's got the right numbers, but anyway. So the very first item there, implementing a new comprehensive growth management system.
Thank you for catching that. That
Yeah.
confused me.
Well, and that was I think I had Kathy go back and correct that, and this was an old version of that. One of the things you're going to see in the manager's report tonight with the upcoming year's budget, this is absolutely the top priority, not even a close second, for the upcoming year in terms of the recommended budget for y'all to consider. We've got to get a comprehensive growth management system in place, and it doesn't exist now. So that's all the way, and it's listed here, new design and construction standards. We don't have those. A construction inspection program, we really don't have that. Floodplain management. A lot of these, sediment and erosion control is supposed to be done by the state, but we know how that goes. I mean, when it rains, just go down to Millbridge and you can see how effective that is. And then in addition to that, creating a new engineering division to manage that program or those systems. One of the things you're going to see tonight with Chaplain's going to present is the street acceptance process, updating that. So what's happening is, think about, we went ahead and changed the TIA ordinance to protect ourselves, where Chaplain's going to go over this tonight in order to put some of the subdivisions in a position to turn some of their infrastructure over. So we're gonna piecemeal it along the way as kind of triage, if you will. But at the end of the day, at the end of the fiscal year, we should have a program that starts with the comp plan and goes all the way down to street acceptance or infrastructure acceptance and everything in between. And all those pieces should sync with each other, and it should all jive. So that is a monumental task to build a system like that. I mean, think of this is like the Manhattan Project in Waxhaw to some degree. I mean, that might be an exaggeration a little bit.
It's probably more fallout.
It's just as dangerous. Yeah, more fallout. Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to be a huge, and Dennis and his folks have already started working on it, but this is a major priority for the coming year.
Questions?
Sure. I asked Warren earlier, and I share with him that 2A is probably the most important thing that we have in front of us. And if we don't pay attention to it, it's got the biggest price tag and it's very dangerous. We talked about not a specific schedule, but, and you just said this coming year, but if you have an idea of when you think some of these tasks should start, many of them have started, when they might be halfway through, when they might be finished, it would be helpful, I think. And then as you do the budget, what are the financial ramifications from it? And, as we also said earlier, if you need help in this is someplace, if I think as a commissioner, if we don't help you, we are very, very remiss.
Well, just to give you an example, so this is how the budget's going to line up strategically with these initiatives. So there's a simple example. There are 3 positions recommended in the upcoming year's budget, and they all relate back to managing these programs. And those are the only 3 positions, new positions in the budget. In addition to that, there's going to be a line item for some consulting services that we'll also have to tap to make sure we're getting the technical advice to implement these programs. So all this lines back up with what's in the budget, lines back up with what's here.
And again, a key point here is it says implement a new comprehensive. This is a only comprehensive. There's nothing, we're not changing anything, we're not improving on
Yeah.
something that was there, we're just, this is it from ground up.
It could be a yeah, because it doesn't exist
Right.
today. I mean, Dennis had a great analogy. You know, one of the things I think we have done a good job of was building inspections. So, I mean, we can feel comfortable with the quality of the construction that's gone on. But look, here's an analogy for you. So, let's say we're issuing building permits and not inspecting the work. But in addition to that, we're issuing building permits based on standards that don't exist. Does that make sense? That may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's akin to that sort of thing. That's what we've been seeing.
On K,
Yes.
and this is new
Also
net
known as the-
additional,
Yeah.
a street sweeper program because of what we got today.
Right.
And I've mentioned it because I called Chaplin, he's gonna add it to the maintenance definition tonight
Good.
on the,
Okay.
so I'm sure Todd's got the words for that right on the tip of his
Well, you know, and that's one of those. You know, it's street maintenance and it's also environmental.
Yeah.
So it touches a couple of different categories.
Probably bigger on the
Yeah,
environmental side
maybe.
than it is on maintenance.
Right. Yeah.
Other questions on 2?
I can touch base just, and I'm going to go over this. You'll hear this again tonight, but we've on what's on this sheet is M, is we've broken the Kensington Drive project up into 3 phases. The first phase, if you've been down Kensington Drive, you can see it's coming apart. I mean, you know, Todd went out there and did some patching, but so we're going to do for the part that's failing structurally, a process called full depth reclamation. And you can go online and kind of see the video on how that process works to repair just the infrastructure itself in terms of the roadway itself. But then you get into the curvature and the reverse angles and all the crazy stuff that's in addition to that. But that's phase 1 is basically just the asphalt side of it. And that will require the roadway to be closed down. We're probably looking at this summer, July time frames, what we're hoping for. Of course, you know, while school's out before it starts. That'll be a number of weeks to complete that process. Then the second phase, think of the Curitin Town Center with the on-street parking and the street light, all the work that we're going to have to do there. That's a different type of work. That will be probably this fall with that, and there may be a short period of time where the road has to be fully shut down, but for the most part, they're going to be able to keep the road operational, maybe closing a lane. I mean, they'll be strategic about when they, you know, obviously when school's going in and coming out, I mean, they'll have to manage all that. But so that's the second phase. And then the third phase is to be determined, is the Kensington Drive and Waxhaw Marvin Road intersection. That's the improvements that St. Matt's and Landover are responsible for to a large degree. And what we're finding is we may need even more improvements than what were originally identified, so we're going to have to wade our way through that. So this project, you can think of it in 3 different phases. And that's good too, because it helps. You know, we have a limited budget, so it allows us to kind of incrementally walk through, and then we can see how much money we have left after each phase and kind of recalibrate.
Are we biting off a little bit more than we can chew? If you look at, I guess, E and A, I mean, they're both intertwined. That's big, major things for one department to take over. I don't know if we're ready to do that.
We don't.
You understand what I'm
Which
saying?
ones?
A and E. That's just, they're like meshed together. It's all engineering and
Yeah.
it's all the road
Well,
surfacing.
yeah, and the
inspections. I just don't know if.
Well, the good news is, you know, and it's a lot of this, you know, we're making a leap of faith, and I mean, just a full disclosure here, we're already working on a lot of these things. So, and since Dennis has been here, so we've made some good leaps and bounds towards completing some of these things, but it is, you know, by the end, so there's 2 pieces of this. So by the end of the fiscal year, next fiscal year, we hope to have all these things done. And then it's a matter of becoming, acclimated to these programs and how they work as far as a staff perspective on administering it. So this is going to take a couple of years to really get things smoothed out, but we don't have any choice. We got to fix, all these things that are on here, we do not have any choice, and that's what Commissioner Burr was referring to, I believe. If we need more help, then it's our job, it's our job to come forward and, yeah, right, right. Well, I think that, yeah. 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 Well, we sat, all the staff sat down and we all agree with what's contained in here. This is, we feel this is a lot. We feel it's doable. But it is a lot, and we absolutely have to stay focused. And then the danger is, what's going to come up that we don't know about today? What's going to get us, what might get us sidetracked? So, so there is an element of, risk in all this, but, from staff's perspective, we don't have any choice. We have got to get these things up and running and in place. We've got to fix Kensington Drive. Yeah. I appreciate your, yeah.
So stormwater needs, I believe I've heard somewhere that's population-based, mandated a certain threshold.
Is it 20,000 triggers? 15, and that's right, because we're already at a level that technically we should have that in place. But that's one that we're going to have. That one is a huge one by itself that we will not be able. We will be able to do some work on that and then tee that up for FY 17-18.
And again, probably highly consultant-based.
Yeah.
They're experts in that.
And the town's going to have to make, or the board is going to have to make a policy decision on, implementing a stormwater utility. Number one, if you do that, and then how are we going to fund it? This stormwater fee is typically what's done, but there are other creative options. But so that's one that we really need to get a lot of this other stuff under our belt, because that's going to require a lot of focus and a lot of discussion by itself.
How does Phase 2 Kensington, the timing of that relate compared to the opening of the church?
We should be. I talked to Steve Blakely this morning, and he said this fall we should be in a position to start. The church, I think, with their late start date, I don't know that they're going to be done. Yeah, I would think the first of FY 17 on the church, because they were running way behind. But the good.
The school's still hoping for, or planning on November.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what
Okay. Well, but
Brody said yesterday.
but not at the church.
November at the church, August at AME in Marvin.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, you get that late, they could wait till January. But
We're going to move as quickly as we can. That's one of the reasons. We're going to move as quickly as we can on Kensington. I mean, it's that phase is going to be an interesting phase as far as the Curitan Town Center part of it.
under old alphabet N, recommend right-of-way acquisitions as opportunities arise. What does that mean?
Okay, here's a perfect example. And Dennis sent me an email, and I've been sitting on it because we need to get through all this before we can. So we have I won't get too specific on this because it is a real estate issue, but there's a piece of property in foreclosure that's for sale that is in the trajectory of where we have a road planned. So typically what you would see towns step forward and it's actually, from what we can tell, pretty reasonable price being in foreclosure. Typically what you would see is if a town is serious about implementing their transportation plans such as that, you would buy that piece of property to reserve that for future construction. So that would be that would be a real life example that exists today. And there will be other, opportunities. And it's the way, there's a piece of property on the Waxhaw Parkway, that this relates to. But it's the board's decision if you want to move forward with that.
Question on that. I mean, this piece of property, if it were to be a state highway, they would purchase it from us at a later date. Is that how that?
Well, this will be, we would probably donate that right away to the state
Oh,
for them
nice
to,
of us to donate
well,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this is one that, I mean, that's the whole thing, the Waxhaw Parkway, it made the funding list as the very last,
Gasping for air project.
yeah. So this is gonna, the Waxhaw Parkway at this point, I'd say, is something that's gonna be either town-funded or developer funded to a large degree. If we wait for,
Some kind of partnership.
yeah.
It's gotta be.
But yeah, typically what you'd see is if a town had purchased a piece of property and the state was gonna come in and we would more than likely donate towards getting, because that helps the funding, getting the project funded in the first place. If we had a piece of,
Moves us up to
Right.
schedule.
right,
Yeah.
particularly if we've got if we've purchased a whole lot of property along
Yeah.
during a period of time.
Dennis, could you you got something to say, but could you come up to the mic so we get it on? No.
Just, I think what the town manager said is absolutely correct. Wanted to just point out a little clarification, and not to get too specific, but the real life example that I shared with the town manager is actually for a portion of the Waxhaw Parkway that's already been built and would not be a state maintained road. This is the section that's built more or less as a local street, and so the majority of it is already constructed. So,
This is on the west side versus the east. Yeah.
Any other clarifications on Initiative 2?
And just with focus on local transportation planning, just a good example, the Gray Byram Highway 16, that's been something that, I've been working on since I've been here. And best case scenario, if this all plays out in terms of the realignment and signalization of that intersection, is probably a year from now. Okay, so these are long, it takes a long time to put all the players and pieces together to get these large projects like that funded, particularly when it's, there's developers involved.
But to be clear on that, if we wait for the state to fund it, we could be waiting for a long red
Yeah,
light.
yeah. Or the town could step in and just put the whole bill, and it's a $2 million project, that's what we're trying to avoid. Yeah, the state would be a longer wait.
Okay. Initiative number 3, implement intelligent growth and economic development strategies.
I think the tough reality is that we have so much going on, we're not ready to really be serious about economic development. That's just a hard truth, I think, in terms of the way you would like to approach it as we mature as an organization. However, having said that, we have worked a lot with Monroe, Union County, EDC on some potential projects. Nothing has panned out yet. So the message there is, we really need to define what economic development is for us right now and how we want to play in that game. And however, understand that there will be some opportunities that come along, until we reach a point where we've matured somewhat and getting some of these other systems in place that we're trying to focus on. But we're going to continue with the Buxton, I think that's on here, the Buxton contract. We'll continue to work with the Monroe Union County EDC. And obviously the new comp plan and the UDO play into economic development. But beyond that, it's, spending a lot of staff resources is going to be a tall order right now. But Chris Platay's he's really good to work with, and he, when there's something that comes his way that he thinks we might be a good fit for, we talk about it and we present it to the board.
And the comp plan will provide clarity on our biggest area off the parkway.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Does that do y'all agree with that? I mean,
So I have a question. So number 4 says recognize the Monroe Union County EDC as the primary economic development organization for Waxhaw. Do we have to do any house cleaning with the current situation we have set up, or tidiness?
you know, I haven't, since I've been here, I haven't had any contact with the Waxhaw EDC in terms of real projects.
They're in suspend mode.
Okay, so, I mean, that's a board. The good thing about the Monroe Union County EDC, I mean, they've got dedicated staff and resources that do economic development activities. You know, the Waxhaw EDC is more of a shoestring operation. But
Is there-
I'm not sure, so the board defining the role for the Waxhaw EDC may be something that,
Is there a price tag for recognizing, because I believe at one point we were told they were an ask for a certain dollar amount to the Monroe if we wanted to participate with them. Now, this has been several years back.
Cindy Cotto stated to me that the county pays every other municipality's share. That we are a partner by default because the county covers the cost of everybody else.
That's new then, or at least to me. I mean, I was thinking the number $6,000 came into somewhere in there. They wanted $7,000.
Well, maybe if you maybe a board seat.
And that might have been, yeah.
I think that was the difference. But generally, they're funding the Monroe Union County EDC to look after everybody in the county, all the municipalities except for Monroe. So Monroe and Union County funded together. But
So
everybody
to that
pays.
point, though, if it is like, let's just say it's $10,000 for a board seat, we were giving $25,000 in the budget for the Waxhaw EDC. Would it be worth the investment of a seat on that board with the representative from Waxhaw?
That'd probably be getting Chris to.
You don't have to pay to be on the board. They anymore. They've set up a board structure
Okay.
similar to the way we do. And I've asked Chris to let us know when a seat opens up so we could possibly put
Okay.
somebody on it.
Okay.
Or not put a nomination forward.
Did that change recently?
Yeah.
Okay.
It started last year.
Okay. Because I know they used to have to pay to.
Just a follow-up question with the Waxhaw EDC. Is there any risk involved in just ignoring that?
I'm not sure of the history on the creation.
We budgeted money for them last year. They never asked for any. They have as a standalone entity, have a responsibility to report the books. Probably wouldn't hurt us to just write a letter saying that we are suspend operation until we can get our strategy in place, because we have to do A through C first. I'd probably just as a courtesy, probably let them know we've come to this realization. They were struggling with board members. Stan Sidor moved. Chris, they haven't met in a year, that I know.
Okay.
So probably good. Just send them a letter.
Okay.
Anything else on 3? Number 4, meaningful community building and engagement.
And this one needs some work. So I know the mayor had sent me some suggestions, and we can incorporate these or.
Well, yeah, I noticed that it looked a little needed improvement, and I reached out to Jenny Buckholt, the person that is the town's hired for communication. Some miscommunication, and what she did was send section 4A and C for the specific goals in that piece of paper that Warren passed around. In anything I did, that's her work. In essence, the communications part of it is policies and procedures around regular communication, policies and procedures around emergency communication, and create and implement a social media policy. 3 big ticket items. Obviously, there's a lot of tasks associated with it. And then not any surprise to anybody that ever gets on the website that we're going to, she's also leading the charge or consulting on get a redesign and 21st century website. And then, given that it's 21st century, you can do things like pay online, and
Maybe a 20th century would be.
20th century
Yeah.
would work too.
Okay.
So, but those came from her.
Okay.
And then the brand obviously is in the middle. And I think she's on to come to the board in a work session.
Yeah.
The next meeting, right?
Right. Branding. We'll have to, we'll look. Okay. You know, if she's ready, we can.
She is.
Okay. Just if you get that, and we'll. Okay. But you know, I think A and what she has come up here with A and C is an improvement over what we've got now. I mean, I would recommend including A and C or substituting what we've got there for what she came up with. If y'all are okay with that.
Yeah, I am.
We're going to lean on Jenny really hard. There's in the recommended budget, there's money plugged in there for branding and marketing and communications, and you know, she's been really good to work with, very responsive, and we would recommend continuing with her with the expertise that she brings. I mean, she's really upped the game on that, and having somebody dedicated doing that really pays dividends.
You made a conscious decision to go that route instead of adding staff
Yeah.
until we get a policy in place and get.
Right. I will say, you know, item D, we talked about at at the retreat or workshop we had in February about conducting a community survey to determine the satisfaction level of citizens with town facilities and services, as well as their desire for new facilities and services. So that is something that I think the concept was to do that every other year, this year being the first year, and then every other year thereafter. So that's a pretty big deal. I mean, and again, in the recommended budget, there would be monies set aside to fund that survey. Okay.
And we'd have a board champion for that.
Okay.
when it's done. Anybody know what the promotional games and contests are? 'Cause I want to sign up.
Jenny,
for
I
that.
think, did Jenny come up with that one? I think Jenny came up with that. So maybe she'll roll that out when she.
I asked her about that. She said, "How did that end up on there?" She was embarrassed that.
Oh, did she? So did it come from her? Kathy? Okay.
So that one,
Yeah. That,
E comes off because
okay. Let's.
part of the social media policy.
Okay. We'll. Yeah. Let's take E off. Okay.
Any other questions on 4? Okay, moving on to 5.
All right.
Quality of life services.
Of course, this the number A is a big one. We would recommend that improvements be made to Town Creek Park, and continuing with the Town of Waxhaw YMCA development, as well as doing a needs assessment for Nesbitt Park. You know, one of the things they're looking at Nesbitt Park right now is, do we really need more parking? I think what they're finding is through if you've seen the aerial shot from the drone that Natalie had, you know, during one of the events that is a heavy usage weekend, there was a lot of vacant parking up at Kensington Elementary School. So it may not be a parking problem more than a not wanting to walk far problem. But anyway, they're going to do some more assessment on the needs. There is a need for a bathroom facility at Nesbitt Park. I think those two things, you know, looking at the parking and a bathroom facility, will pretty much complete that park to a large degree, and that's what they're looking at. And you know, I'll just lay it out there. Related to the downtown park, my recommendation, and we can talk about this, is to direct the advisory board to go back and let's get those costs down as much as we can, more than $4 million. I don't know what the board's opinion opinion is on that.
I'd like to say something about the development of parks. Being as the alternate on the Park and Rec Committee, I think it's been discussed that we don't have to go first class. I mean, clean the place off, let people into the site, use a lot of volunteer labor.
As a starting point.
Yes, I mean, I think we need to appoint somebody on the Park and Rec Committee to kind of head this up. Be responsible for putting the volunteers together.
Because there, I can tell that just in the recommended budget that you're going to get from me, there are no funds allocated for implementation of any park improvements or new development of parks for the downtown park. And the recommendation is going to be to continue to work the plan to get it more affordable, and then with what Commissioner Warner said, maybe that would be an additional directive. I mean, obviously the board's call, but that's what I would recommend.
We've had consistent with Commissioner Warner, we've had a couple schools come out and say, next year's service projects, could we clean the parks, or could we do something like that? And some coordination effort of that would be a good effort.
I don't know if it'd be under this heading or not, but I thought that we pretty much agreed as a board, I think, to do a public-private partnership with the farmers market. And I don't know if that should be under this as not line 6, to form a agreement and to get a more permanent location for the farmers market.
Well, that's a great, because I can tell you there are two things that are not in the budget. Anything related, it's completely the board's directive, wherever you want to go with it, but one is anything related to a farmer's market. And the second is there's no recommendation in here about utilizing the parking at the Women's Club downtown. So those are two things that I don't know if you want to talk about them in terms of the coming year, of the upcoming budget, or let some dust settle and then dive into those. But it's your call on how you want to move forward with it. But I can tell you that those two things are not in the recommended budget, because I think it feels like they need more discussion and more work.
Well, in my behalf, what I would feel like that we should do is actually just work towards it and get some things going for the following year's budget, so that we would have some things in line and actually have some ideas and foundations of costs and where and how come and what fors, and actually do some groundwork, not actually do physical groundwork, but basic work. Figure out how much it's going to cost us, where we can put it, what facilities we need, that type of thing.
So begin working on it.
You're right. And it really, I think we could just, it's just work, if you know what I mean, groundwork.
Could I say something? You talk about the farmers market, and they're all cramped there, and the parking and everything. And where I live just above the park area there. I see a big empty field that the town mows the field. They never use that field. In the future, we plan on putting a building there. And it's a block off Main Street. It's not quite as visible, but not that much unvisible. Why could they not move their farmers market over there, at least in the temporary business? There's lots of parking.
Which field are you referring to?
The Horton property.
The one, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a driveway, there's a little there. You might have to pull a gravel down so they don't get stuck or anything, it gets wet, but that's about it.
I think, Jim, if you do a little exploratory, they want a little bit more permanency to leave their tents up year-round and their tables up year-round. Is that a problem in that field? I don't know.
The town doesn't ever use it. The only time I've ever seen we use it is on the spring and fall festivals, and some people park around the edges. A couple of them people use my driveway and park up there, so I mean, it's the town's property.
I'd look for direction from.
Well, if we're beginning to look at what our possibilities, that could be one thing we look at.
The other issue is, I just need the town to own that piece of, that Horton Park, and getting volunteers out there, getting people on it, I think will really move the thing forward. When people see that this is not just a piece of empty field, this belongs to me.
So, can I throw two things out from what I've heard then and just get your feedback? So number one is engage or utilize a volunteer group to begin utilizing, to the degree possible, the Horton property.
Right.
And then secondarily, I guess just generally related to the farmer's market, begin pursuing or working with the farmer's market to pursue options on a permanent location. Is that?
I wouldn't consider that a permanent location, but it could be. I mean, you could set it up in the parking lot of the building you're going to put down there, et cetera.
So you want me to add those two things?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, did you get that? You'll have to clean that wording up, but, okay, all right.
And on number 5, it says implement the letter of intent for the special use park agreement. They've been receptive to that?
Yes, and that's very close. It may happen this fiscal year, but it's close. They've been very great to work with.
You mentioned that the utilization of the women's club parking lot is not listed here, and it's not in the budget. So you had given some indication about the parking study?
So the women's club asked for $35,000 to expand and improve their parking in exchange for the town entering into a parking agreement where we can utilize certain dates. Well, the quotes that we got were double that. So so I asked Kurt to work with them to develop just potentially what a schedule would look like, so we would understand the days that we would be able, or the public would be able to utilize that parking. So you put yourself in a position to know what you're buying. So when he gets that done, then we can marry that up with the quotes and basically say, with what it's going to cost in terms of what we'd have to pay to improve that parking lot, this is what we're going to get. Is it worth the cost benefit? Is it worth it? So that's why there's no recommendation in the budget related to the women's club. However, there is a recommendation in the budget. The current year's budget that allocates $8,000. I think $8,000 to them for their operating expenses. So you will see an $8,000 allocation for their operating side of the house, but not the $35,000 that they asked for, nor the $60,000 or $70,000 that we determined it was going to cost to improve that parking lot. So that'll be something that we'll have to come back to the board and just present that to you and say, now the parking study does recommend those sorts of partnerships, but we need to understand what we're buying before we make it.
So do we run any risk of them shutting it off completely since we did not go with their option?
Well, I mean, we still give them funding.
Right.
So.
But we will explain it to them that we're in the process of looking at it.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't
We'll do
possibly
that.
shut us off.
And I'd like to see where they got their estimate from. I haven't seen, the source of their $35,000 estimate. Because Todd talked to two different people, and it was. So anyway, so we're. So we're not ready to present or make a recommendation on that yet, but we will be.
I have a question too on A4. Does that include improvements to David G. Barnes Park?
No. Natalie's. The improvements to David G. Barnes Park. I don't recall any funds allocated in the recommended budget. I'm not sure they asked for any for David G. Barnes Park. Oh, okay. We are working on the long-term, we're working on a solution to that issue down there. I talked to Natalie today about it and gave her some direction on what we need to do to get that off center. If you're talking about that, then yeah, we are moving on that. Okay. All right.
Other questions about 5?
You're gonna, and of course, tonight, the Millennial Task Force results will be, Kurt's gonna present those, so you'll hear those tonight. Okay.
And with the funding and the budget for what the recommendations are.
Well, we'll, yeah.
Okay,
We'll hear what they are, then I can tell you how the budget lines up with it.
okay.
Okay. Strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just looking to see if any other.
Oh, okay.
Okay, productive and strategic partnerships.
And to a large degree, this is, purely the board's, arena in terms of building and strengthening strategic municipal partnerships in the county, as well as with your state representatives, NCDOT folks, and there's I think a recommendation that we engage other municipalities around us. I think we've got a lot of common interests, a lot of common concerns and problems, particularly with transportation and annexation. So sitting down and talking about those and then taking that to the next level of engaging our state representatives and letting them know that this is a problem, both on the transportation side and the annexation side, and we need some help.
And you're going to hear about this tonight, but Warren and I sat down with Representative Brody yesterday, and he made it real clear. We're not coming at it from a regional view, Western Union County. He's not interested in trying to help too much. Anything? Huh?
Never mind.
Well,
He's not interested in helping us at all, I can tell
well,
you that.
he flipped it around, and said, come June 8th with your list of improvements to the roads on 16. He said, not widening it, come with the list of improvements. He said, because we're never going to solve transportation the way the state allocates money today. Because he understands the count problem that we have, Dennis. He just said we're never going to compete with the rest of the Charlotte Regional Transportation. We're the lowest count-wise, so we're always going to be at the bottom of the funding pool. So,
They don't take into account that they have a 4-lane or 6-lane highway going down there to get their heavy counts. Yeah, okay.
what they take into account is the
I'm being facetious
the
here.
formula from the state, and that would take a law change to. That's why he was looking at it differently.
Coming at these issues collectively as
Right.
municipalities and villages, he's got a lot of strength versus us going it alone. And then obviously continue to work with the Y and the WAA and the Waxhaw Business Association and the homeowners associations as those opportunities arise.
I think we need to add the museum on C.
Okay.
And because we're getting real close to getting them finalized back from the museum. And I think we've done a great thing because that's a cultural type of center. It's just not an open park, it's a cultural center, is what I would say.
Are y'all okay with? You got that, Melanie? Okay.
And since we're talking about possibly initiating a public-private partnership with the farmers market, we should put in an initiation of trying to get something formalized with the farmers market. Honestly. Everybody good with that?
Personally, under B, I think we should add the North Carolina League of Municipalities.
Yeah.
Because they're our main lobbying arm.
Did you get that?
items? Clarifications? Okay,
Financial policies, ready to,
pardon?
financial policies?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. All right, so basically the financial policies that are in this document existed to a large degree in the current year's strategic priorities. So we've broken those out because these aren't very dynamic, meaning they won't change from year to year. Typically, they won't change. They're pretty static, and this tells us the way that we're going to manage the town's finances above and beyond what the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act calls for. So it adds a level of discipline for staff and the board, and how we manage the town's resources and build some things into the budget that aren't required to exist otherwise. Just hitting some of the highlights. Typically, when I do budgeting on the revenue side, I won't budget any more for the coming year than I think we're going to get in the current year. So let's say we're going to get, let's say we're projected to get, just round numbers, 1.5 million in sales tax this year. That'll be the number that I'll use as a starting point for next year. Because what I've seen happen with what the state does is they project, well, okay, they're going to get X number of dollars, and we think it's going to grow 3%. Well, what happens when the recession turns down? It's not only do they not meet the last year's number, they got to cut in addition to that. So it just allows a level of surety in terms of you generally meeting your revenue projections. It's a little bit different with property tax because the state lays out a formula you have to use to calculate your property tax. But for most of your other revenues, there's a level of flexibility in how you project those. So that's one thing. So some other highlights. One of the things we have started doing is a 5-year revenue and expenditure projection. We make some assumptions on revenue growth and expenditure growth, and then we track that out 5 years, and you'll see your expenditures are going to exceed your revenues, but that's the work that has to be done every year to get those two to balance. But it shows you how big that gap is. So that's something that we will build every year into the annual budget, as well as a 5-year capital program. Now, the 5-year capital program, it's fluid, it's flexible, it changes every year, but it gives you an idea of when certain projects are going to come up, what the cost of that project is, what fund it's going to come out of. So that's something we've also started this past year doing as a 5-year, and a lot of this started with the true budgeting, exercise that the town went through before I started, which was good work that COG did. Also on the capital improvement side, we put a priority on taking care of what we have versus going out and building new things unless there's an identified funding source to go build new things. I think you should always focus on taking care of what you have. Don't overextend yourself. Let's complete some of these parks unless there's a specific identified funding source that allows you to do something otherwise. But that's a policy there. We've built into every quarter we do a financial report just to give you some basic financial information on where the town is as of the close of that particular quarter. In this document, it states that pay-as-you-go financing is the town's preferred method of funding for capital. It doesn't say we won't borrow money, but we want to put ourselves in a position to be on a pay-as-you-go basis. I'll give you another example of what's in the upcoming year's budget, and something I focus in on everywhere I've been is increasing the amount of money you set aside for your capital reserve every year. So last year we set aside $200,000 for capital reserve. This year we're setting aside $300,000, or the recommended budget contains a recommendation that we set aside $300,000. Next year, $400,000, $500,000. Be very disciplined about setting money aside to put yourself in a position. Now, it's going to take some years to build that up to a point where you're really able to do some large projects, but if you're disciplined about it and you know that right off the top you're going to start setting aside money for that over time, that's going to pay a lot of dividends, and it's going to help you avoid interest costs that you would incur through debt financing and allow you to do more with the money versus pay debt. So that's built into this discussion. But there's going to be some projects we're going to have to borrow money for. But on the whole, over time, we really focus on building up that capital reserve. Let's see. And it designates a threshold of a target of having a 50% fund balance, as a minimum, but it's a target. I think we're about 40% right now, after Kensington Drive and the YMCA and a couple other things, but that was at the close of FY well, that was actually at the close of last fiscal year, FY 14-15. We were about at 4 million we had more cash than that, but the part of it that your undesignated or unallocated fund balance was about 4 million. But our goal is to increase that up to 50 million or 50%, which would be about 5 million and beyond. Let's see. It also sets aside a 1% contingency. So let's say you've got a $10 million general fund budget. You're going to set $100,000 aside for unanticipated expenses. Just like around the house, you got things that break and things that come up. So you got a little pot of money you can go to fund those unexpected things as they come up. So that's something that you build into the budget. You do it every year. Let's see. And it also talks about financial partnerships. Seeking out financial partnerships with folks as a means to providing services in the most cost-effective way versus the town just having to bear the burden of everything. But as a matter, think about the YMCA, perfect example. That's a financial. It's a park partnership, but it's also a financial partnership. So that would be a good example of that. So those are some of the highlights in the financial policies.
Will we approve these?
Yeah.
Okay.
This along with the goals and objectives, or the strategic priorities, will be documents that you approve.
Okay. Under accounting policy, and I may have this wrong, I thought the board was going to take ownership of appointing the auditor. I know we didn't do it this year. I mean, we're going to go through that process of, I know we have a committee, but
If the board, and if you're ready to change now we're late in the game to change.
We're too late now, yeah.
But if the board wants to, absolutely, that is your call on changing.
Okay.
And going through we can set the process up and solicit proposals and then bring them to you for your consideration. And it's time. It's time to change. We've had it for a long time. So.
Okay. Questions about the financial policies?
Make one comment? Sure. Having read both your presentations, I'd like to thank you and the staff for the amount of work that's gone into this. I mean, compared to a year ago, compared to 2 years ago, this is such a departure that, again, this just gives us the working tool to move forward. So thank you.
And staff, we spent quite a bit of time putting this together, so thank you to staff. I appreciate that.
John?
I'd like to request a recess between the two topics.
We'll have a recess for you, John.
Thanks.
He needs to be thanked for that.
Okay, Warren.
Not right now. I was at a seminar this morning and I'm full.
You'll need 'em tonight.
Protocol manual.
So this document basically
Thank you.
memorializes some information from the School of Government and the International City County Managers Association on mayor responsibilities, board responsibilities, manager responsibilities. So this is not reinventing the wheel. And I think, Swanee, Georgia is kind of key for the way they said, the ICMA holds them up as the model. Yeah, we reference, lots of UNC School of Government information. There's nothing magical about any of this. It just memorializes the way that the board and staff interact in the council manager form.
Well, it's something that the board asked for last year as part of our strategic, or our goal, so.
It's not reinventing the wheel, it's information that's already out there, it's been developed by the School of Government and or ICMA, the International City Managers Association. It does give some background on the second version of this, was completely in the first version, there was some overlap, corrected stuff. But anyway, it gives some history of the town transitioning into the council manager form of government in 2005. I think up until 2007, the chief of police was here. So just a little bit about the culture of the organization, form of government, then it dives into mayor's responsibilities, board responsibilities, manager responsibilities, and how everybody interacts in the primary. So I mean, short of just going through it or answering any questions, I don't,
Go ahead, Paul.
I went to a school, I believe, with John, school of government, over this topic, and this almost looks exactly to almost a letter, the manual.
so it is,
Well, it is.
True, I
it-
mean,
it
it's
is.
almost exactly to the
Yeah.
letter, and I'm very familiar with it already.
Well, and the idea, I believe, is for the board to adopt it,
Correct.
to formalize it, but,
To be polite, I mean, when you did your 120-day review, you politely pointed out that we didn't have a protocol, and we weren't operating necessarily on all cylinders in the form of government that our charter called for. And that that reiterated the need to, let's put it down in writing, and to your point, Paul, you're absolutely right. School of Government, COG, League of Municipality, all looked at it and said, okay, yeah, you're taking our documents and putting it together into a protocol manual, that's great. So, questions, thoughts? And the idea, I think you said, Warren, would be then we'd use it, or we'd adopt it next.
yeah, we could
next
bring it
meeting.
back in a formal, with all the signature pages and all that at the next meeting. And, there haven't been issues with it. I mean, I think the board, it does operate this way.
Yeah.
But for the next guy or gal or man or woman that's here,
Game
I mean,
rules.
you've got something, you've got something in place that, at least as a point of reference.
Go ahead, John.
So it references on, I don't know which page. Let's see, one, two, third page back, second paragraph. Specific duties, responsibilities, and authorities of the mayor are outlined in the town's charter. Now, is that referring to our town charter specifically, or when the changeover in the management or the government style took place? Because this goes quite in depth here. Are all these things listed in the town charter?
No.
No.
Okay.
What the town charter says is we have a board of commissioners that consists of a mayor and 5 commissioners, and that we follow the council manager form of government.
Okay, so then it
That
relates to this then being there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this goes way beyond what's in the charter. This is just typically what you'd see at a council manager form of government per the way the UNC School of Government looks at it.
And the wording there is intended to say the charter gives authority to the structure. That's,
And the structure we choose to follow is under the UNC School of Government, Council Manager form of government.
correct.
Okay.
Questions, comments, concerns, reactions?
You know, just, the very first thing under the,
Common sense.
I'm sorry. The very first thing under the Board of Commissioners' roles and responsibilities, set direction by annually reviewing and approving the town's vision, mission, values. That's the exercise that we just went through. So, I mean, this is how this works. I think the town manager's roles also, it references ICMA, but it also has some language out of the general statutes as far as the manager's statutory responsibilities.
Any need for discussion?
So then the expectation would be that when this is presented at our, I guess not tonight, but our next board meeting, it'll be presented in this form or something very similar. We adopt it and then we agree to abide by it, all of us.
Just like the rules of procedure, just like the code of ethics. This is all housekeeping that, we ask to be done.
Looks good to me.
Okay. If there are no further discussions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
See you at 6:30. You want me to bring anything else back on,